Welcome back to CBSN. I'm David Begnaud at CBS News headquarters in New York. In less than 3 hours, we are expecting a verdict out of Aurora, Colorado in the case of James Holmes, the man accused of walking into an Aurora movie theater and opening fire. I'm joined on the phone now by Rikki Klieman, our CBS News legal analyst. So, Rikki, the jury's been deliberating for roughly a day and a half. Now they come back with a verdict. Did you expect something so quickly?
No, I did not, and I think that it's very rare that I predict a verdict in advance because I do think it's like reading tea leaves. But when you have a case of this magnitude that went on for 10 weeks, that had about 1,500 photographs, hundreds of witnesses, 24 hours of videotape of the defendant and his statements to psychiatrists, that I think that the logical conclusion, and you can tell me, David, later after 6 p.m. Eastern, if I'm right or wrong, the logical conclusion is that they came back guilty as to all counts, and not guilty by reason of insanity. And the reason I say that is probably obvious. It would have taken a real long debate for the jury to come back with what we call an NGI, a verdict of not guilty by reason of insanity, because you have to believe that there would be a lot of conversation that would be passionate and heated on both sides of the debate to ever come back with an insanity verdict, whereas it is much easier to have consensus with a crime of this horror and this magnitude to come back guilty. It's an educated guess. I've had a lot of years in the courtroom, but I think on this one, I feel pretty secure.
So, Rikki, we've heard some of the evidence that's come out where they've said, look, this is a troubled guy. Okay, this is not a guy just looking for attention. This is someone who's got some serious issues. So let's say
he's schizophrenic.
Okay, so let's say you're right. Let's say they come back with a guilty verdict. Are we then to believe that the jury has set aside the fact that he's schizophrenic and mentally disturbed?
No. You have to understand that there were 4 experts who testified at great length, 2 for the prosecution and 2 for the defense. All 4 agreed that he suffers from severe mental illness. There is nothing about this defendant to show that he is in any way malingering or pretending, faking. But the difficulty here for the defense, and they knew this from the very beginning, that the difficulty for the defense is that there was so much planning. And the definition of insanity to become a full-blown defense and cause a not guilty by reason of insanity verdict can be that you are totally psychotic, that you are truly mentally ill, but you could still tell the difference between right and wrong. That's a really narrow definition. And I think that as sick as this man is, and he is, and that is just beyond dispute, is that there was too much evidence about months and months of planning that I think would cause a jury, when you have 12 deaths and 70 injuries in a horrific event, that the jury would be far more logically coming back guilty. I'll respect the jury's verdict, by the way, David, either way, because this is a case where you could understand why a jury could come back either way.
So, Rikki, would this be a case if he is found guilty where it was unanimous? Does it have to be unanimous for it to be guilty?
Yes, it has to be unanimous for a guilty verdict. And now, if I am correct, and I could be wrong, if it is a guilty verdict, let's just take the if. If it is a guilty verdict, what happens next? Usually in these cases, there is a brief recess. Could be it's a Thursday, could be till Monday, perhaps a bit longer, could be another week or two. And then that same exact jury comes back to decide the ultimate penalty being life or death. You should remember, too, these lawyers really are in this case to be able, not necessarily only having their hearts in a not guilty by reason of insanity verdict, but also that they want to save his life. And I think that the life or death part of the case that penalty phase, should it come about, if there is in fact a guilty verdict, that the penalty phase is probably going to be the most troubling, because we do have to think as a society about the fact of whether or not it is appropriate to execute someone that's mentally ill.
Rikki, did he testify in the trial?
No, but he also did not have to testify in the trial.
Well, I ask for this reason. If he's found guilty, and again, I'm going with your theory here that it may be. It's a big if. But if he is, what's the likelihood that we would see him testify in front of the jury in hopes of saving his life and not being put to death?
This is an interesting one, David, because back in Boston, in the Tsarnaev case being the Boston bombing case, I was very clear that he was not going to testify in his own defense, even at the penalty phase, that there really was no percentage in putting him on, though perhaps in retrospect there would have been. But in this case, it may be intriguing to the lawyers as to whether or not, if he is able, we have to remember he's been medicated now with antipsychotic medication for a 2-year period. So he's been medicated so long that he may be able to express remorse and to express his horror at what he did, since he's under medication, and at least to be able in the penalty phase to apologize and say he was sorry. Now, that may go somewhere with a jury, or it may not. But this would be a very interesting question for this defense team, because, of course, if he does testify in any way during the penalty phase, the prosecutor has the right to cross-examine him and could really go back through all of these moments of the planning and all of this carnage that he created, and he might make his situation worse. Ordinarily, I would say no chance that he would testify, but this has a little wrinkle there because of his now looking the way he looks. I mean, he looks pretty normal now. Doesn't look like he looked when this happened in 2012. That it's got to be weighing on the defense. If in fact there's a guilty verdict, this major question will weigh heavily on the defense.
Let's say death penalty is on the table. Let's say he's guilty, and then they've got to weigh the death penalty. Rikki, as you know, it's one thing to say, I believe he's guilty. It's another thing to come back and say, I'll put my name on the form that sends him to death. So take me into the mind, as best you know it, given your legal experience, of a juror who's able to say, yep, without a doubt, I believe he's guilty. But I just either don't have the heart, I don't have the belief, I just don't want to put him to death.
Well, I think it does weigh heavily on any juror to be able to, in essence, sign the verdict form, which is a death warrant. I think that on the one hand, we remember that all of these jurors have been what we call death qualified. And what that means in simple English is that when the jury is selected, and it goes through an arduous process, you have to remember it took months to select this jury, that a jury is selected and by being death qualified, meaning they say either they believe in the death penalty, or even if they did not personally believe in the death penalty, that they would follow the law as instructed by the court and that they could impose it. So already you have a jury, by definition, that is predisposed toward the possibility of a death verdict. Death qualified juries are very conservative juries. So we have that on the one hand. On the other hand, these jurors have to be faced with the fact that he is severely mentally ill, and that they may or may not, or one of them, it just takes one of them, may have a feeling that perhaps we should not execute someone that ill. So there's this second half of the case, should there be a second half, is really going to be much more challenging.
9 women, 3 men, all made the decision on whether or not he was guilty or innocent. We expect that verdict to come down sometime within the next 2 hours. Rikki Klieman, thank you for your expert opinion.
Thank you, David. It was good to be with you, and I'm on my way to you in person.
We will see you on set. Again, we expect that verdict to be read at 6:15 Eastern Time here in New York. We will have live coverage as it happens of this verdict. James Holmes, he's accused of killing 12 people and wounding 70 others as they watched a midnight premiere of a Batman film in Aurora, Colorado. Many Americans will never forget that day. I'm David Begnaud at CBS News headquarters in New York. We'll take a short break and be back right after this.